welcome to everyone online too. We often, it's good to include everyone that's experiencing the meditation this evening. So that's great, and it's lovely to have this opportunity to meditate together. Are there any people here who are meditating for the first time? All right, a couple, all right. Well, I hope I don't lose you, because I was going to... I've been for the last 3 days talking about a really deep insight of Buddhism. One of the insights that actually makes someone fully enlightened. And of course that is the insight into non-self. So this is actually the deep end, deep end of Buddhism. But it's a very important end of Buddhism, because until we see that we don't own all these things, we don't control the body and the mind, then, only then can we let go of them. And that will bring this enlightenment, this awakening, and then also the ending of being reborn again and again. So that's the point of it. I should be an expert by now after speaking about it for 3 days. On Saturday we had a retreat here, and that focused on non-self. Yesterday I gave the teaching about the third teaching of the Buddha. This is after the newly awakened Buddha. And that was on non-self too, the characteristic of non-self. And after that, his 5 former companions, spiritual companions, became fully awakened, fully enlightened. So I didn't check up yesterday, but I don't know how many people, I don't think anyone got enlightened, but nevertheless, it's very important for us to at least have this understanding of non-self, because it will actually improve our lives too if we stop owning a lot of things that don't really belong to us. And of course, this sense of self is a big troublemaker. I don't know if anybody here would disagree with that. It gives us such grief. Usually this idea of who we are, this idea of I, me, myself. It's really one of the big sufferings in life for most people. And yet it's an experience for the unenlightened mind that's very, very common. That's how we experience the world, in terms of I, me, and myself. And of course, when we experience the world like that, is it going to be the way we want it to be, the world? No, it's not the way I want it, all this. And so we find that what we are really running up against is the conflict with reality. We feel that there's an I, me, and myself in the picture, but reality doesn't include an I, me, and myself in the picture. And you might think, oh, how desperate, how dismal not to have this self. I'm losing this self. But the Buddha said, we're not losing anything, actually. It was never there in the beginning. It's just an illusion. And in actual fact, when people become the first stage of enlightenment, actually, they see through this view that there's a permanent existing I, me, and myself. And they see that it's all really a process of body and mind. And it really brings them enormous happiness, enormous lightness. Because when we own all these things as I, me, and myself, when we feel like we're controlling them and life is going the way it usually goes, out of control, we wonder what's going wrong. And of course, what's going wrong is I, me, and myself. So this ego is a real troublemaker. And I told this story, forgive those who were here before, of Nissarano. Nissarano was this Sufi holy man. He was a sort of a bit Zen-like, but he's, of course, Sufis are part, whirling dervishes, that sort of thing. They're from Islam, really. And he was supposed to have been in Turkey, but he was a real scallywag, to say the least. But one evening, he was upstairs in his house, and his wife was downstairs, and she heard this almighty thump. And she thought, my goodness, what's happened to Nissarano? So she rushed up and she said, what's happened? I heard this terrible thump. And he said, "Oh, my coat fell on the floor." She said, "What? Your coat fell on the floor? It's not that heavy?" And he said, "Oh, I was in it." And that's the trouble with life. I was in it is the big problem, actually. If we remove the I from it, and then life is as it is. Life is happening through our experience of the body, through the experience of the senses, and through the mind. So this is quite an important teaching that the Buddha gave, and it's central to this awakening idea. And of course, he mentions that if we really had a self, it shouldn't lead to suffering. It shouldn't cause us a lot of grief and misery. It shouldn't do that. And he also said, if there was a self, we should be able to control things. We should be able to control this body. We should be able to control this mind. We should be able to control these senses. Anyone here can do that? Anyone here pumping the blood through the body and running the breath and all this sort of thing, and also being able to control the mind, not thinking the thoughts of not thinking thoughts that we don't want to think, and not feeling emotions we don't want to feel. And of course, it's very obvious to us that we are not able to control those things. So this is a very important understanding that the Buddha brought to this insight of non-self. And of course, one of the biggies is that if there is a permanent I, me, and myself, it should be permanent. And the Buddha, one of the principal discoveries he made was, wow, this whole world, everything is impermanent. And so this idea of impermanence, if something's impermanent, can it really be this sort of permanent I, me, and myself? And of course it can't be, can't qualify really. So, and the reason we develop, this is a perception we're going to develop tonight of non-self. And the reason we develop that is, the Buddha encouraged us to develop it, is so that we start looking for these things. He encouraged us to develop the perception of impermanence, to look at change, look at all these, everything that's changing around us, so that we can get a deep understanding of impermanence, not just a shallow one. And usually the unenlightened mind is looking for permanence. It's only looking for permanent happiness. It's looking for a permanent self. And these things, according to the Buddha, not on offer. And that may sound a bit depressing, but in actual fact, when you actually understand a little bit the nature of reality, it actually improves the experience of life, because we're no longer fighting with the way things are. And so often we hear ourselves saying, oh, it shouldn't be like that. Auntie has died, or a child has died. When that happens, we always feel like it shouldn't be like that. And of course, this is part of this nature of reality. So once we have these perceptions, once we develop these perceptions, we'll be able to see it more in our lives. And so this is a very useful one to lead us towards stream entry, towards the first stage of enlightenment. So it's a really important perception, and a perception that will turn into a experience for us when we really have a very peaceful mind, powerful mind, pure mind from meditation. And then we can see this characteristic of non-self, anatta. So, and I'd like to mention the story about my teacher, his famous non-self story, which was when he was in Thailand and he was living in the monastery for men wishing to ordain in the Ajahn Chah tradition. He was a famous teacher in Thailand. And every week they'd built a sauna in this monastery. Saunas actually were built in the time of the Buddha, believe it or not. Hot country, but I think they felt that this was, improved. It did improve the health. And anyway, that's why Ajahn Chah, this famous teacher, was coming once a week to this monastery. And so Ajahn Brahm, who's my teacher, he's in Western Australia, he listened to the talk by Ajahn Chah, and instead of going to the sauna and looking after his teacher, other monks were there, he meditated. And he had a very, very deep meditation. And then when he came out of the meditation, sometime later, maybe it was an hour, I don't know how long, and he was going to the sauna to see his teacher, he met him on the way. And his teacher saw him. And according to Ajahn Brahm, he realised, he's had a good meditation. He'll understand things. And he said, why? And Ajahn Brahm said, I don't know. And Ajahn Chah said to him, if anyone asks you that question again, the answer is, there is nothing. There is nothing of a self in this. Do you understand? He said to him. And Ajahn Brahm said, yes, I do understand. I think he understood the time. And then Ajahn Chah said, no, you don't understand. So that was the story that goes with this non-self, this guided meditation on non-self. So this evening, as we're getting, I might go on a little bit more about it. So it's a very important teaching, as I mentioned, of the Buddha, and one of his methods is to really look at all the details, all the parts of something, and see the way they relate to each other. So he's always teaching, the Buddha was always teaching about a process. And when we see a process, it means there's not a self running it, because often people think, well, if all this is happening, it must be it must be me running it. And especially with this idea of rebirth, well, it must be me going to the next life. And of course, it's the mind going on to the next life, changing all the time. And he gave a famous teaching of the perception of non-self in the Giriyamananda Sutta. This is a really famous one with 10 different perceptions we can develop. And one of these is as I mentioned, the perception of non-self. But so what the Buddha was pointing to, one of the teachings he gave, which I will just mention very briefly, it's probably going to sound, is anybody totally new to Buddhism? No? That's good. When I gave the teaching about the characteristic of non-self, the sutta the Buddha taught, I realised, anybody hearing this would just think, what? This is so different from all the spiritual teachings I've ever heard. Because really it's a really deep teaching about the nature of the mind and the body. And this is something that you don't hear described like with this degree of definition, detail, and relating it all. It's really quite extraordinary. But in this teaching, anyway, this is one of them. And the Venerable Ananda, his assistant, the Buddha's assistant, said to the Blessed One, Bhante, it is said, empty is the world, empty is the world. This sounds very Mahayana, doesn't it really? Mahayana Buddhism. In what way, Bhante, is it said, empty is the world? And the Buddha says, Ananda, it is because the world is empty of self and what belongs to self that it is said, empty is the world. And what is the self? What is empty of a self and what belongs to self? And this is very interesting teaching. It's one that we can take into the meditation. The I, Ananda, is empty of self and what belongs to self. Forms are empty. So the things that with visual forms that we see are empty. The I consciousness, this is the consciousness that we need, the part of the mind that can decode what we see. I call it software. And then from that, eye consciousness, eye contact, when we can actually see something, recognize things. So this is really the arising of perception. And then the Buddha mentions whatever feeling that arises when we have this contact through the eyes, through the ears, got to get this right, nose, through the mouth, and also through the body and through the mind. Whenever we have these sense contacts, then there will be a feeling. And it will either be pleasant, unpleasant, maybe it's painful, that's very unpleasant, or it'll be neutral, what most people would say when you say to them, how are you feeling? Oh, it's nothing, there's nothing going on, and that sort of thing. And then he says that these feelings too are empty of a self and what belongs to a self. And he mentions then the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body and the mind. And then he ends with, it is Ananda because it is empty of self and what belongs to self. That it is said, empty is the world. So I hope that hasn't totally bamboozled you. You think, what is he talking about? And so I'll give a few more, give a little bit more information about what it is basically, is seeing that process really in our experience, checking up whether it is actually just happening to us, it's occurring, or whether we're actively involved in it, we're controlling it. And of course, very obviously, we're seeing, if we're out and about, we see all sorts of things. We can't stop. We can't control what we see. We see all sorts of things. Even when we're on the internet and we're, say, watching something that we're interested in, we can't be sure of what we're going to see there. And it's the same with all the senses. They are an experience. This is happening through the eyes, happening through the ears, the nose, the tongue, the mouth, the body, and through the mind. And it's just really paying attention to that we're not doing, say for instance, the seeing, we're not doing the hearing, and we're not doing the smelling, tasting and touching, all that. It is just happening. All those experiences are happening. So I will mention one teaching that I think people will be very familiar with, and this is from Bahia. This was a teaching the Buddha gave to somebody who got enlightened in no time flat. They were very quick. This Bahia of the bark cloth, Daruchira, he was somebody who was so keen to hear the Buddha's teaching that when he went to the monastery where the Buddha was on an alms round. And so he rushed out of the monastery to catch up with the Buddha. And said, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? And the Buddha said, this is not appropriate time. I'm on alms round in the town, thank you. And he said it a second time and a third time. And then the Buddha gave him this teaching in brief, because Bahia, he quite rightly said, that, but Bhante, I could pass away, or you could pass away, and so please teach me. And so he gave this teaching. In that case, Bahia, he must have been a bit... You should train like this. In the seen will merely be the seen. In the heard will merely be the heard. In the thought will merely be the thought. In the known, merely the thought, the known. That's how you should train. So it's, in other words, just experiencing things without this sense of self or wanting it to be one way or the other. And then, this is very interesting. It's a very deep sutta, very deep teaching. When you have trained in this way, you won't be by that. When you are not by that, you will not be in that. When you are not in that, and this is interesting, you won't be in this life or the next or between the two. Just this is the ending of suffering. So when he says by that, I think often when we have our experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching and thinking, we build up a sense of self from that. particularly after this, the Buddha mentions these feelings that come up. All beings, enlightened beings too, have all that process the Buddha described. But once feelings arise, we've perceived something, a visual, we've seen something, and this pleasant feeling comes up. Whoa, I think I want that. And if we see something or we hear something we don't like, I've got to get rid of that, don't want that. And things that are neutral feeling, we don't care about too much. And so we can see how this is really driving us towards reacting to what we're experiencing from a sense of self. We call this wanting or craving. And so this will take us onto, will carry us onto clinging to some of these experiences and attaching to them, identifying with them. And of course, when we can't get those experiences, then we will experience suffering because of it, or disappointment. So this is a teaching that the Buddha gave to Bahia. So really what we're going to do in this meditation is we'll develop the present moment awareness, and then just look at what we're experiencing through the senses. Because we've got our eyes closed, we'll probably be mainly hearing that we will get and feeling in the body. It's enough. And so very interesting to see, look at what we're experiencing. Are we actually controlling these experiences through the body, through the ears? And of course, you can make up your own mind, because it's an exploration really, just to notice that these senses are they're happening by themselves really. And we don't control them, we don't run them. That's the idea. But that's what we're checking up in the meditation. But so now we can get ready for the meditation. And the basic process, for those that are new to the meditation, the basic process it's still the same. And then the content, the approach that we take can be sometimes different. And this is for insight, for wisdom. Yeah. So we can find a comfortable position, check up if the seat is comfortable, the cushion comfortable. And we can close the eyes, or we can half close them if we're feeling a bit dozy. And we can come into the present moment and just be with this body, our bodies. And taking a few deep breaths. And we can let go of what's happened, the past, and let go of what it will happen after this. And just be here. We're free in the present moment. We've got nothing we have to do at the moment, and there's nowhere we have to go. So it's like being on holiday here in the present moment. And we can give attention to the body, and physically we can relax the body physically. First of all, we can tighten the feet and the legs and the buttocks, and just hold that for a moment and let go. And we can tighten the abdomen, stomach and chest, and let go. And we can tighten the hands, the arms, and the shoulders. And we can raise the shoulders and let go. And then we can tighten the neck, the face, and the head. And let go. And this is a great way to relax the body. Sometimes we're not aware of tensions, not aware that we're holding the body in a particular way. So it can be very useful. And now we can, very importantly, relax the body mentally. And we can bring to mind the head, the back of the head, sides of the head, and give this mental massage, soothing, warm mental massage to those areas. Just allowing them to relax. And then moving the attention down to the forehead and face and the neck. And giving these areas a mental massage, particularly around the eyes and particularly around the mouth. Soothing, giving this warm, relaxing attention. Healing attention. And now we can bring to mind the right shoulder starting at the neck, and we can give the right shoulder this mental massage, soothing any tightness, stiffness, any sore areas of the right shoulder. And it's like these invisible hands massaging our right shoulder. Now we can bring to mind the right arm, starting at the top of the right arm and moving our attention down the right arm to the hand and fingers with this mental massage, soothing, relaxing with this kindness, with this sort of care for the right arm, hand and fingers. And now bringing to mind the left shoulder, starting at the neck and moving our attention along the left shoulder like a mental massage, these invisible hands, relaxing, soothing, allowing us to let go of any stiffness, any soreness. And now we can bring to mind the left arm, starting at the top of the left arm And moving our attention down the left arm, all around it, to the hand and fingers, with a soothing, warm mental massage. Allowing the left arm to really relax. And now we can bring to mind the back just below the shoulders, and we can move our attention down the back, soothing and relaxing with this mental massage, with this kindness, warmth, healing. Moving it right down to the buttocks around that area. And now we can bring to mind the front of the body, just below the shoulders, and move our attention down the chest, stomach and abdomen, soothing and relaxing using this mental massage, these gentle, invisible hands. Giving attention to any areas that are a little bit tight or a bit sore, uncomfortable. And now we can bring to mind the right leg, starting at the top of the right leg and moving our attention down the right leg, all around it, down to the ankle, foot and toes, soothing it with this mental massage, with warmth and care, relaxing the right leg, foot and toes. Starting at the top of the left leg, moving the attention down the left leg like a mental massage, all around it with a soothing mental massage down to the feet and the toes, relaxing them, soothing them with this kindness, friendliness. And now we can bring to mind the whole body sitting here, hopefully feeling comfortable, balanced, aligned, at ease. And we can be aware of the present moment, whatever we're experiencing the present moment. Maybe it's something in the body, a feeling in the body. Maybe it's the breath. Whatever we're experiencing moment by moment, we can be aware of it. It can be our mindfulness of this present moment, and also what we are, the sounds we're hearing. And we can even be aware in the present moment of what states of mind we're experiencing. Recognizing if there's thinking. Recognizing what we are feeling as well. Whatever is happening here and now. This passing parade of experience. And it allows us to be present as we see what's coming up moment by moment. Maybe saliva in the mouth, all sorts of things. Awareness of the cushion we're sitting on. Moment by moment. Just knowing what we're experiencing now. And now that we have some stability in the mind, steadiness of mindfulness, just being here now, we can look at our experience, the hearing, feeling things in the body, maybe a sense of smell, and look and see, am I making this happen? Am I driving this experience of hearing, or is it happening? And from that occurrence, am I getting a feeling and reacting to that feeling? Either finding it pleasant or wanting it to finish. This sound, this feeling in the body. Am I controlling the breathing that's happening in the body? Or is it happening and very quickly I am reacting to it? So we can check up to see if that's the case. If we're really making it happen, as they say, or it is just happening by itself. And then we're reacting to it from this sense of self with either like or dislike, depending on if it's pleasant or unpleasant. Exploring if this experience is empty of a self. And now, as we are coming close to the end of the meditation, we can share whatever we experienced in this meditation. Maybe more peace of mind, maybe some insight into what we experienced, maybe some joy, some lightness from the meditation. We can share it with everyone here in this hall. And we can expand the sharing beyond this hall in all directions, sharing it with all the human beings and the non-human beings, devas, animals, insects, all sorts of beings. Whatever we experienced in the meditation, maybe some insight, as I said, maybe this feeling of lightness from just witnessing the senses happening, maybe some peace and stillness in the mind. Sharing it with all beings further and further around this hall, covering the whole of the world and all realms of existence. Sharing, giving this gift of what we experienced. It's not just for ourselves, it's for all beings. That they may have some understanding of the non-self aspect of reality. For their happiness and well-being. And now we can come back to ourselves and we can have this aspiration or intention to notice more and more in our lives, daily lives, this non-self aspect, that things are happening through the senses. We're not necessarily controlling them. We often react to them, but we can see that the process is running by itself. And when we see that, we can get this sense of lightness and of joy, witnessing how things really are. A sense of not having to control how things are, just experiencing them. Being at peace with what we're experiencing, even when it's difficult. It's not the way we want it to be. And now we can reflect on the meditation and just think, this perception of non-self. How do I feel now? Did I notice that things were happening? Did I notice when I reacted to things? Did I notice that feeling drives me, but it makes me feel I've got to move when it's uncomfortable, when it's unpleasant. And when it's neutral, ignoring it and maybe feeling uncomfortable with that, feeling it's boring. Noticing what we experienced in the meditation and what caused these experiences to come up for us. And lastly, what we learned, other things that we learned from this experience. And now I will ring the bell 3 times, and for those who wish to can come out of the meditation and slowly open the eyes and move the body. So I hope people found that interesting and maybe noticed something in their experience they hadn't seen before, because rarely do we pay attention to how we're experiencing these senses. And so it's a very useful exercise to see that, and so that we can stop controlling things that are actually just part of a process. And we tend to be control freaks or doers, trying to control it, trying to own things that we don't need to own. So it's a very useful and freeing, as I say, quite something that brings lightness and joy to the mind. I remember many years ago when I was in Sri Lanka, a friend of mine, he had this long bus trip, and I said to him, Bante, that means he was a senior monk. He is a New Zealand monk, and he was on this long bus trip, and I thought, oh dear, that can be very, very tiring and exhausting in Sri Lanka. They go for a long time, these buses. And he said, no, he said it was delightful. He said, I was contemplating the 6 senses, this hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the mind, and the objects of them, and seeing them as just being, happening. They're just empty. They were just happening. And so this sort of lightness of being just the passenger, you are a passenger in a bus for sure, viewing this happening, and it was quite a delightful experience for him. I thought, great, really good, because these bus trips can go for, some of them I've been on 6-7 hours. You can be going for long distances, and it takes a long time because they stop all over very often, so to pick up new passengers. So there we are. So now we can open up. I think Langdon will mention. Now is the announcements, isn't it? This is the idea before people start disappearing. As soon as they hear all the announcements. I hope it was okay for you too. All right, all the best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bit different.
There's a very few announcements. If you are new to meditating and new to there is a special class for beginners on Friday nights at the moment at 7 p.m. called Discovering Buddhism, and this Friday is the 4th in the series of just learning about meditation. But you're welcome if you'd like to join. You don't have to have been to the first 3. You can just come along for that Friday night at 7 p.m. a group of about 40 or 50 people who join that with
Yeah,
Ajahn
it's
Brahm.
quite good. Mm.
There are other opportunities to meditate during the week. There's another meditation tomorrow night at the same time, 7:30, with our lay teacher. And there are online opportunities through the Discord platform, which you can find out more about through our website. But there are group sits each morning between 4 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. if you're an early riser. And I think Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. in the evenings as well, Monday to Thursday nights, that's for half an hour. And they're often led by a monastic. So that's about a 20-minute guided meditation in the evenings. If you'd like to have more practice at home, there is next weekend's teaching program on the Sunday will be by Venerable Chi Kwang Sunim, and then the Monday night next week will be Ajahn Sadharo. So they're all the announcements we have. Are there any questions here in the hall?
Here we are, yes. Anybody going to say, what was that about? Yeah.
Evening, Ajahn.
Good
Thank you so
evening.
much.
Good evening. Oh, that's good, Fatima. Yeah.
My question was, during this particular meditation,
Yeah.
I came up to a point where I was recollecting how even trying to think of something outside of the mind wasn't really conceivable.
Right.
And so I thought, if there's an aspect in this experience where I'm not able to create or insert an idea
Yeah.
or create a feeling from there, which aspect seems to be permanent to it? What's the bit that's always there? So everything else seemed to fluctuate. So feelings fluctuated, sensations fluctuated, thoughts fluctuated. So I thought, what's behind the thought? And yes, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but it was just sort of a search for what's beyond that.
Yeah, permanence. I think this is a very good question, because this is what it's a very it's something that drives human beings, probably all beings really, looking for this permanence in something. And that's something that, the idea in some religions of a permanent God and a permanent heaven and all these ideas, very appealing, very appealing. But the Buddha found from his own experience, vast, there wasn't anything that was not impermanent. And that is good. He said, even if there's a tiny bit of permanence in the world, then the teaching of the Dhamma is impossible. Then it's impossible to end rebirth. We will be stuck with experiencing things as we have experienced in this life. Most of this life probably a pretty fortunate sort of life, really quite pleasant. But there's always going to be difficulties and problems, and you just see the nature of life. And that's why people are so... And they have this idea of this permanent heaven, and they think, fantastic, this life is a bit of a torture and a torment, but then I'll get to all the happiness, bliss and permanency of heaven. And without any reflecting that in their experience of this life, what would this permanence be like? Is it some frozen condition where everything stops? And of course, using your mind, you realise this is probably very unlikely. But the Buddha, from his own experience of past lives and his ability to actually use his mind to go to other realms of existence, we call them heavenly realms and so on, he knew that all these realms were impermanent. He recollected his past lives, and I think he must have checked out nearly all the realms of existence and realised that they were all impermanent. And you have that lovely teaching. It's a bit sort of interesting, actually, really, where he has this showdown with Baka, the Brahma, that's right, Baka the Brahma, who thought he was the creator of all, he was permanent, he controlled everything. And the Buddha appears to him. And they have this sort of, it's almost a comic, I think, because they have this sort of showdown to show who's more powerful. And one of the defining things is when Baka, a Buddha says to Baka the Brahmin, please, you disappear from me. You just make yourself disappear from me. And he couldn't do it. And he said, I will disappear from you. And he did. And so he was just proving, he was making a point to this Baka the Brahmin that he wasn't permanent, that he wasn't the all-powerful, the creator of all existence, all that sort of thing, and making it very clear. And he mentioned when he recollected his past lives that he had been one of these Brahma beings that are very powerful beings in the universe for a very, very long time. They last for a very long time. So he had been through all these different possibilities, checked them out. And no doubt he must have been through the ghost realm and the hell, I suppose, the hell realm too, seen those too, and realised that all of them, through and through, impermanent. But it's a very natural thing for us to want permanence, because the Buddha says the four things that drive our perceptions, they distort our perceptions, is seeking permanency, that things to stay as we want them to stay in what is impermanent. This is the nature of someone who's not enlightened, seeking happiness in what is not really happiness. It's not going to be permanent happiness, that's for sure. And also seeking for a sense of permanent self in things that are non-self, he would say, the Buddha would. And also looking for beauty in things that are not really beautiful, they just are as they are. So this is natural for us as, say, unenlightened beings. But for an enlightened being, they don't see it that way. They see the impermanent as the impermanent. Everything. Lock, stock and barrel, as they say. And they also see that, this beauty, this happiness, this lasting happiness is not possible. It's like a fluctuation of happiness and unhappiness. It's just like, and in actual fact, really, this is where permanent happiness is just not possible. Unless there is an experience of the opposite, anything that becomes permanent will just disappear from awareness. Eventually the awareness will turn off, because the awareness works on change happening. And also an enlightened being will see that there is non-self in all this experience of life in reality, and also that what we call beautiful is not necessarily beautiful. It's just as it is, really. So this is what an enlightened being sees. So this search for the permanent is something that drives people. Really, it really does. And it's in the Buddha's teaching, he says, not on offer, really. Once there is ending of rebirth, you could say that's maybe permanent. Sometimes we have these, Ajahn Chah used these, he used these quite funny terms. He said, you know what's permanent in this world? Impermanence. And dukkha, and also, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, and also non-self. So he would, but particularly impermanence, he is making a sort of a fun of that, really, in a way. So that's a very good question. It's a deep question, because if we really see that this is what the nature of the universe is its impermanence, change, transitoriness, and nothing lasting, then we can work with that. Then actually we are not in conflict with reality, and it can actually reduce a lot of the unhappiness, the disappointment with things changing in our lives. These bodies, they change over time. It's very aware. One becomes very aware of it as you get older. But this impermanence rules, as they say, really. And we can either understand it or fight it. But if we fight it, we're going to lose. You do hear people who, I can remember there was what was that? There was a teacher of a psychological, what was it? It was called co-counselling. That's right, co-counselling. Something I did when I was younger. And the founder of that had this idea of that he would have immortality of the body. He did until he passed away. It's just incredible. People get their bodies frozen, like Walt Disney had this cryogenics, I think, And the idea is that this old body that passed away due to a sickness can eventually be cured when they find the cure and then reactivated. I thought, oh, what a nightmare. It sounds like Halloween, this sort of terrible. You come back to this body, if that were possible. Really, I don't think it is possible. Once the mind splits from the body, that's it. Forget it. It's moved on. But if it were possible, my goodness, that'd be awful. We come back to this old body that's prone to sickness and will fall sick to some other disease and then probably have to be frozen again. And it could go on for a while, actually. And this is all because of permanence. It is laughable, really, I think. And because anyone that's experienced, someone close to them, a loved one who's passed away, and if you see the body after it's died, like I saw my father and I saw a best friend when I went to the funeral, and, even touched the bodies, it wasn't them. The mind that was activating that body had gone. And you could just see it. And sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced it too, it doesn't even quite look like them as they did in life. It's quite interesting. And so you really get the feeling, moved on. And that's, I think that is the reality. So I think Walt Disney, I think he's probably moved on. And I should say, due to his attachments, he's probably come back to something related to what he was doing in this life, if he had the karma to come back to it. So there we are. So, there. Yes.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
I think we all know you can only freeze food once, actually.
Can you? Really?
Freeze it.
You can't keep freezing it again. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there we are.
There was just one online question,
good.
There was a comment as well that someone wrote. I'd just like to share that someone wrote they felt immense peace, joy, and clarity. Thank you for the wonderful meditation.
Oh, great!
So
that's great.
The question that came in earlier is not related to meditation, but someone wrote, "Hi from Italy. I've been many times in the monastery, long-term lay guest, and I would like to start the process to become a monk.
Oh, all right.
But it's too heavy for me physically. That means the taking care of the kitchen and doing the physical heavy work as an anagarika. What advice could you give me?"
Right. I see, yes. Yeah, it can be quite a lot of work when somebody like a man or a woman wishes to ordain as a Buddhist monk, particularly in the West, they become anagarika for monks or an anagarika for the women. For men, it's anagarika, and for women, it's anagarika. And they help out in the monastery. And in the West, there's a lot for them to do, because there is looking after the kitchen. He's probably talking about Santa Chittarama. Isn't it? It's a Pali word, but it sounds so Italian. It's an Italian monastery in Italy, Santa Chittarama. And it means the Santa Chitta, the peaceful, the mood of the peaceful mind, or the state of the peaceful mind, Arami. Yeah. Oh no, park. It's the park of the peaceful mind. Santa Chittarama. Sounds great. You're probably listening to this and think, what terrible pronunciation is that? No, but it is very similar to Italian. And so in the West, these monasteries, there's, an anagarika, looks after the kitchen, does driving, does gardening and all this sort of thing. So there is quite a lot to do. So I'd say to this person, go to Asia. Because if you go to Asia, then you don't do any of that. You're a lay guest, and then they don't call them anagarikas in Sri Lanka. They call them, there's another name. Sorry? Same, yeah. You do have anagarikas, but in most monasteries, the ones that I know, they have another name for it, and they start to wear brown lay clothes and things like that. Yeah. Oh, it's coming to me. What do you call it? Pandu Palasa? No, Pandu, something like that. Pandu. Yeah, they're Pandu is like dye, so they're wearing brown, but it's not robes or anything. It's just sort of lay clothes that have become brown. So in Asia, you won't be expected to do any of those things. Most of the monasteries, they don't. And so I would recommend Sri Lanka, and there's some very good monasteries, and some of them have quite a few foreigners. Like the Nauyena is a monastery, very famous monastery in Sri Lanka. It's got lots of foreigners there, foreign monks. And there are other I'm trying to think of other monasteries where there are foreign monks. There's quite a few foreign monks men foreign men who are ordained in Sri Lanka. But also Myanmar is possible, though it's a pretty the Pawok side or tradition. And also one place that is very good for training is SBS, Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary. I've been there many years ago now, but it has international community there that receive training, and they have 2 weeks where they do study of the Buddha's teachings and the rules for the monks. And also then they have 2 weeks when they do the practice. But I think they must do some of the practice while they're studying too, I assume, because it probably continue, but not as much. They have the 2 weeks where it's free. So I recommend you look up Sasana Buddhist Sanctuary. It's very popular, so good luck. Good luck. But the senior monk is from Arya Dhammika. He's an Austrian monk, and he's been teaching there for about 7-8 years, something like that. And it's an international one, and so that may suit you. Asia would be much more less of that sort of work that you have to do. So there we are. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions here in the hall?
There we are.
Doesn't seem like it. So then we can finish for the night, Ajahn.
Yes, that's right. So I wish you well for checking up on these experience of the six senses. Are they really just happening by themselves, or am I running the show, as we often say? Of course, what's really happening is right up to feeling, up to that. What we're seeing is what the Lord Buddha calls the dependent origination, the arising of dukkha. This is the experience of all human beings. And right up to feeling, most of us, then we go to the next one, which is we crave, or we want things, or we want to get rid of them. And then we cling to those things that are pleasant. Sometimes we even cling to the things that are unpleasant. And then we create this existence, as it were, and then we can be reborn again and again into these different existences. So this is all part of that teaching, really. So it's part of that process. But just phenomenal that somebody could really see that all and with clarity. And it doesn't matter whether it's a mind 2,568 years ago or now. The mind is very, very much the same, and the experience is very much the same. So those teachings are literally timeless. They really are, and they're an encouragement, an invitation, that's what they call it, to investigate, if this is the case. And I think that obviously some of the person that had a very peaceful, deep meditation found that this sense of non-self, that experience is happening, very pleasant, and they can stand back, not own it, and then also not necessarily have to react to it. We can, through this sense of self, I don't like this, I like that. And we can see that. I know Ayakima, she was great. She said, when she was very strong. She said, whenever we feel like we want to move or change our posture and all that, she said, just tell yourself, it's dukkha that's making me move. The sense of self too is making me move because I'm moving away from what's unpleasant. So very, very interesting that she taught like that. So I invite people, encourage people. The Dhamma does this really to investigate, and that way, when we understand things, wow, what a difference it will make in our lives. And who knows, maybe we make that breakthrough to stream entry, so on, and then beyond. It's only really possible once we see through this view of a self, which really just imprisons us. We don't realise it's a bit of a straitjacket for us because it's really defining and defining who we are, what we identify with, what we've attached to, and so therefore very, very limiting. But we hang on to it. A lot of people hang on to it when in reality they'd be much better if they realise the non-self, that there isn't this permanent I, me and myself in here. So there we are, on the way to stream entry, Sotapanna or Sotapatti. So thank you very much for participating tonight. It makes for the experience when we're all together and the energy for the evening. So for those who like to, we can pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha and finish off.